Hi, welcome to Lit Up 365 Spring Session 5. And in this session, we are going to talk about flow. And so in our last session, I mentioned the use of healthy affirmations. To begin this week, we will be using last week's practice to begin to set up healthy affirmations. But I want to describe here what those are first before we do them in the session. So, typical affirmations, I want to talk about what they do to the brain and why they can be so limiting and not work consistently. So part of what happens is a lot of times is that when we're trying to affirm something that is not true, the brain knows it's not true. And so it will argue the point and kind of drive home and validate that it's not true more than that it is true. A lot of times when we're creating affirmations, it might be because the thing is already coming into our life. So by affirming it, we are giving ourselves the ability to recognize it, but that growth can be really incremental. What I want to talk about is what it means to hold the vision. And so when we're holding a vision, this isn't visualizing. We're not trying to convince the subconscious mind of anything, right? We all know the genius is in the subconscious mind. We're trying to make our conscious mind aware of what the subconscious mind is trying to show us. So I talk about this all the time, that desire is actually a message from our subconscious mind that something is available to us that our conscious mind isn't seeing. And so what we're trying to do when we're doing an affirmation is we're trying to become aware of it so we can recognize it. So what I like to do is call this holding an intention. And I like to do it by creating a salient experience. So that is what that's one of the practices we're going to do this week. And so it's actually going to be the practice connected with this session. However you define source. So whether you're a person that believes in a deity or in one mind or in guides or angels or whatever your belief system is, source is still, even not to deny that belief system, actually with that belief system, source is still something we experience within. So whether it's a deity or a one mind or a guide, where we experience the revelation, where we become aware of whatever source is trying to give us, is within. So what happens is when we set an intention, our left brain accesses that infinite potential of the right brain. So remember, that right brain is that big picture thinking, and the left brain is definition, is reality, is the way we experience reality. So we want our reality-based brain reaching into that infinite brain for solution, because that way we can start to create things even if we don't believe they are possible. So in this, it's realizing that, okay, I need to awaken and allow to emerge from within me what is available to me. So instead of looking outside, we often wait for something outside of us to bring us the answer, but nothing outside of you organizes your life, right? Realization is within. Inspiration is within. Regardless of its origination, your wisdom is found within. So this is how we begin to find flow in our life. The external world is unpredictable. And to count on consistency there creates suffering. A lot of people are experiencing that right now. We're having an external condition that is potentially dangerous to many of the people in our species. And it's created an inconsistency. When we're living in flow, we're living with an ability to trigger this brain function that's able to look beyond those conditions to come up with a solution that is best for us. So instead of just following the guidance of other people, instead of having any other people tell us who to be or what to do or how to handle this situation, we have this internal ability to say what is right, not just for me, but for the species as a whole. What is right for me and what is right for other humans. So beyond the importance of internalizing our source, it is also important to internalize our focus by doing what is ours to do while serving the larger ecosystem. Scientific studies have shown that the best thing for our brain, the thing that makes the most happiness in humans, is giving sustenance to other. Now, the scientific research measured that by money, but you can see it in food as well. To a lot of people, food is love. I've known people like that in my life, to where when they love you, they want to feed you, they want to give you sustenance because it brings them joy, right? But we're the ones that are resisting that joy, often by willfully persisting in our agenda, in things going the way we want. We want to do it our way. And instead of relying on nature's wisdom, the internal intelligence, that universal intelligence of DNA, it is always about balance. And so what I want to talk about here is there's a plant documentary that I watched that is about, it was an evaluation of whether or not plants have a mind. We know they don't think. Thinking is a brain function. Plants don't have a brain, but they do have a mind. And the way they measure mind is if something has memory, if it communicates, and if it adapts to external conditions. And they did this study, and they did find plants do have memory. They remember, they did tests with sunlight and to see if plants would seek the same direction if the sunlight changed. And they do. So that it's not just that they're aware of the sunlight, they have some memory of paths that have worked. They also adapt. Obviously, we see them. They grow around buildings. And I mean, you can see that in abandoned locations, nature starts to take over. People spend thousands and thousands of dollars and hours of their life trying to contain nature by having gardens, by having yards and mowing and weeding. We're controlling nature in this aspect, clearing grass out of the cracks in our sidewalks, where this is nature. If we leave it alone, nature will be thriving and vibrant and grow. But I want to talk about the communication piece with this documentary and what they discovered. What was happening is that there was a situation in Africa where they were having a severe drought, and they're elk-like. They're I don't remember the name of them specifically, but they're about the size of an elk, and they started to die. Small numbers in the herd, so the whole herd wasn't dying, just a percentage of the herd, a small percentage of the herd. But it was happening all across the country, and they were trying to figure out what was going on. And they finally called in a team of experts from, it was either Denmark or Sweden, but they called them in to try and figure it out. And what they did is they examined the stomach, the contents of the stomach of the animals. And this had been done, obviously, to no surprise. There's a tree there that these animals always eat. And that's what was in their stomach is the leaves from that tree. Well, what had happened during this drought is all the other plants had started to die. And so these elk were consuming large amounts of leaves from these trees. And there tends to be a rule that you learn to follow with plants, and that is to never trim more than 20% of the plant. So you never consume more than 20% of the plant, or you may threaten its safety. So like if you're pruning and stuff, you don't want to cut down the majority of the plant because then it might die. Well, these animals were exceeding that. So they were threatening the lives of the trees because without those leaves, of course, the trees aren't going to get the nutrients they need. So what happened is plants have this organic ability to create pesticides to protect themselves. And this is a lot of poisonous plants. That's what they're doing. They're poisonous because they create a poison to protect themselves from being eaten. And a lot of plants do this. They create natural pesticides. And it's interesting because they create them at a level where they don't completely kill the pest. So there's like this 20-80 rule, which is they'll create enough pesticide to kill about 20% of what's consuming it for their own survival, but then they don't kill off the other. In the same way, dogs. Most dogs are allergic to chicken. And the reason why is because dogs have consumed chicken for a long time. And what nature does is it then makes the dog react badly to chicken. So it doesn't just consume the whole chicken population. Now it's going to go find another protein to conserve the chickens. And this is what nature does, is it adjusts. So there's always a balance. And that's what these plants have done. They had increased their pesticide production enough to kill an elk from killing a bug. That's a huge shift. And once one plant had done it, they could see a sequential pattern of other trees of the same genus doing the same thing. So it went like a ripple across the country. Our brain is seeking that same balance all the time. If we spend our entire life consumed with what we want and don't give a percentage back, there's this concept in some religions about giving 10%, but this isn't supposed to be about money. This is supposed to be about giving back. Again, if we look at humans, and the thing that makes us happier is to give sustenance to others, it is critical that we give sustenance. If we only give sustenance to ourselves, we're falling out of that balance with nature. And this is what creates our addictive patterns. This is how addiction is formed, is it becomes a placating life, and placating life is never fulfilling. We will convince ourselves things are best because that's what the brain does for survival according to its rules that it's learned. But inside we know that there are things that we are meant to give. But those things aren't defined by what we want to give. That plant didn't want to give up its leaves to those elk. It's about what nature is demanding from us. It's about what is needed. This has been a big process for me, and what in my next step is the fact that I'm going into a field I didn't want to go into, but it's where I belong. It's where my next step is. And so it's something I've always known but really resisted. I convinced myself that it wasn't the right place for me, but it is something I do need to give. It's been sitting here waiting for me. Even though I decided to go another direction, I never got rid of the information I had. I just wanted to convince myself that somebody else needed to do it. But we know inside there's something to give, and that it's going to ask something of us. We're born with that knowing, and living out of alignment with that is what makes us unhappy. So what we want to do is discover it gently. I call this discovering a new 10%. So without evolved brain function, it's going to be difficult for us to just dive into a thing we don't want to do. There's a reason the brain's resisting it. And so the better thing to do is to allow it to be a maturing process, allowing this natural evolutionary cycle to emerge in us. One of our practices for next week, not this week's practice, but the second practice, will be about life affirming and non-life affirming experiences in life. This is pretty much whether we're thriving or dying. It really is about one side of that coin is very life affirming. The other one isn't, because it can't just be about affirming our own life. It needs to be about affirming something bigger than us. So I'm going to be giving you a list, and it's going to be part of your practices next week, about life affirming and non-life affirming experiences. And with it, we'll do an exercise in solution-based thinking. But as we're getting into that and we're thinking about that, we need to look at it as flow, as this ability to flow um, from that internal place, from where that wisdom resides. And so we are looking this next couple weeks at letting the flow happen, but learning that flow comes from within, that internal fountain, that wellspring is within us. So part of the practice we're going to do as well is allowing this to be a time of observation in your life. This is the time of year when we're weeding the garden. We're trying to give the plants we want to grow room to grow. So we need to remove the plants we don't want to grow. So you hear a lot about plants choking out other plants. So if we want a particular plant to grow, we need to remove the plants that are interfering. And when I talk about plants, what I'm talking about is things in our lives. So as we observe our own life, we're going to look at things in our lives that are getting in the way of other things in our lives that we would like to expand upon. But we need to take our time. We can't do this too fast. Think about your garden. If you go out and weed and you just do it quick and just pull things out and, roots are breaking and stuff like that, that plant is going to grow back quickly. Where if we take time and meticulously remove it, it's not going to return as readily. It's the same as this concept of a child learning to walk. We're stepping into something new. So we need to slow down. We need to be meticulous. And so this is a good time for mindfulness. Along with the other practices in the second week, we're going to do a campaigning exercise. So we're going to be looking at the life affirming, non-life affirming, and we're going to tie that to a campaigning practice that I taught. This is the practice I did talk about with, it's the concept of the bees and how to change the way our brain is working. So how to be that bee that has a better option, come in and change all those neurons into a new direction. It is a bit process driven, these next 2 weeks of practice, but we are moving towards the summer. And so these are good practices for making big transitions. And so that's our plan for the week. What you really want to do is just really be in that meticulous place with your life. The daily inspirations are all focused on that. We're asking really big questions right now. And then the exercises I have for you are also big life transforming experiences so that you can be prepared to really hit the ground running through summer. Again, that 3 months where nature really works hard to bear abundant fruit in the fall. So that'll be it for this session. And I hope you enjoy the practices. I'll look forward to seeing you again at Spring Session 6. I hope everyone has an amazing day.